Hi, my name is Theodore. I'm a data visualization enthusiast, student, and project manager. Behind me is a graphic that I developed as a student, and it's really interesting because it speaks to a very topical issue and an issue that affects billions of people. So what this is a visualization of data breaches that have affected multiple companies in a 15-year time span. And it's a live data set that gets updated each time there's a new record of a public breach. So I made a couple choices here because I was thinking about usability, maintainability for this live data set. And what I've done is to take this 15-year timeline and wrap it into what is called a spiral chart. So this is a very uncommon type of chart, but it's very effective at saving space and increasing usability. And so what we're doing here is we're looking at the types of data that was lost, and we're also looking at the scale of data that was lost. So the size of each bubble tells us scale. The colors tell us whether it was mostly email addresses that were lost or whether bank account details were lost. And so we have this unwinding pattern that happens in a clockwise motion. So there were other questions that I wanted to interrogate this data set with. And so one of those questions is, how did this happen? How did these data breaches actually happen? And so we have about 500,000 records, but I wanted to condense those and group those into groups of companies and also types of data breaches. So this is a bubble chart which ranks all of those groups. And so we can see that hacking, for example, is the top most reason for data breaches, followed by accidental publishing, followed by poor security, followed by inside jobs, and then lost or stolen devices, which are exposed to entities that might want to do harm with that data. I also wanted to know which industries were most vulnerable. And so I thought, if I'm going to represent proportions, I could have used a pie chart, which you will hear from people like Stephen Few that pie charts are off limits. So a tree map in this case, I thought would be more effective because we have multiple groups of companies, but they all belong to a category. So it allows you to present this hierarchy of categories without actually losing fidelity as to what the scale of that loss was. And so we can see here that 50% of breaches have actually occurred with web-based companies, companies that primarily deal with e-commerce, followed by 25% of government entities, followed by finance, followed by app makers. So we get a scale, we get a sense of the proportion of organization types that were affected by data security issues. I also wanted to know which companies had multiple instances of data breaches. And so I was able to rank these companies by the size of breaches, and I was also able to use color to differentiate by the method of leak. And so the other question I wanted to ask was, what type of sensitivity or what type of severity affected each breach? And so here we are able to see a relative size of each of these bars, and it's sized by a composite index of data sensitivity, which details, for example, whether it was primarily email records that were lost or whether more severe data was lost, like financial records. And so we'd want to know that because we want to understand, yes, the scale of loss, but also the type of risk that is involved in each of these losses. So apart from knowing which companies are most vulnerable, I thought it would be interesting actually to look at the relative severity of each breach. And so I applied here a size variable to understand, even if we have a ranking of the top 20, which companies or which entities experienced more severe data losses. And so it revealed to me, my data set revealed to me, that the US military and an entity called InvestBank experienced higher relative data sensitivity in their data breaches than other companies. And so I think that's most important here is not so much the number of events as it is the severity of what was lost. And so I thought that was really powerful. Our data sensitivity scale is a composite index which factors in the type of information that was lost and ranks that information in terms of the number of records and the nature of the data that was lost. So, for example, if the breaches involve primarily email addresses, of course that is important as well because it is personally identifying information, but it may be relatively less severe of a loss than, say, financial information, your credit card information, for example, or your health records. So the relevance of data sensitivity is what type of information was lost and what type of risk the user is exposed to when that data breach happens.